So we're going to talk about our approach in education. So, do you understand the word curriculum?
Curriculum, how to spell?
C-U-R-R. Do you know how to say curriculum?
课程. Oh, yeah.
There we go. So there is actually a curriculum that we have to teach the children, even in the bunnies. And the curriculum and the way that we teach the children, it's called the EYFS. So this presentation we're going to talk and discuss, well probably just talk, about the EYFS and our approach to education. So I think I explained before that in a primary school we'll have one teacher and lots of children, and all the children do the same thing and they listen. Now you've already had one day at the nursery, so you know that's not what we do. That's not at all what we do. So instead we have different activities at the same time, and probably you didn't notice it yet, but we tried to take the child's interests first and then come up with some activities according to the interests of the child. So we sort of see it as like a plan, and we'll have individual plans for all the children. So all the children, the teachers should know what a child is able to do and what a child is not yet able to do, but we hope will be able to do soon. So that's the way that we think about the children. It's very individual. It's one child, one child, one child. So far in the Chinese program, we have not asked you to do plans in the same way as the other teachers. Maybe in the future that will change, but at the moment, it's the English and French teachers who have to do the planning, and they have to write written observations. Hopefully soon we will ask you to start some observations on the children, but at the beginning we're still learning the best ways to look after the children, so you don't have to do observations yet. But I think it's very helpful for you to understand how we plan, because the way of thinking for the EYFS is actually very helpful. And I think even if you don't do the written observations, if you learn the principles and the way of thinking, the way of organising, I think it will really help you. I think the EYFS is a great document. So different children will have different needs, because they're not all the same age, they're not all the same personality, and some are going to be quiet and shy, and some are going to be physical, some will talk more, some will have great imaginations, others will like to follow things calmly. So the first thing is we have to know the children. If you really want to teach the children Mandarin, you will respond differently to each child, because they're different. So I sometimes give an example with water. Do you understand warm water?
Warm water.
So if I wanted warm water, not boiling, not cold, how to get there depends on what I have to start. So if I have a cup of tea that's boiling and I want only warm water, I have to put something cold. But if I have cold water from the fridge and I want warm water, I have to put something hot. So the aim is all, in this example, was warm water. But what I do depends on the need of the water I already have. So it's a little bit the same with children. If we don't want all the children to be the same, but we want to be able to teach them. And so instead of warm, it's teaching. We want them to learn and grow. So some children will need something, and another child will need the opposite. And so the first thing is that we must know the children. And you get that by observing, by looking and noticing. So that's the first thing. And then we see the time in the nursery as learning and growth and progression. So in one day, maybe you don't notice it, although maybe you do. You said your little boy repeated a word. But actually, we must also think of 1 year, for example, in the nursery. So what we want to do is to really help the children to know more at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year. And children learn in stages. We're going to look at that soon in this presentation. So there are different stages to learning. So a child might learn to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe at the beginning it's just a sound that and then maybe they understand it on the fingers, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But maybe that doesn't have so much meaning. Later, maybe the child will understand that 3 is 3 different things, which is not the same as just 1, 2, 3. This seems like a pattern. Children are very good at learning patterns. Then the next step is for the child to understand that this pattern has meaning. It's actually, we can use it. And then later, the child will understand that 5, for example, is more things than 3. So the concept of 5 being many things and 3 or 1 being not many things, the child will understand that. So this is actually the beginning of mathematics, of course. So everything we do is one step in that learning journey. Does that make sense? It's probably too much information. Can you try to explain that in Mandarin?
你们理解他刚刚说的意思了吗？
有查那个就蒙特梭利的一些简介。
孟非他刚刚举的说的所有话，你都听明白了吗？
不可能。
他说的是什么？
我就看到了，他说的要提前，要观察，要计划，然后后面说那个，
对，他
可能孩子
说，
要不同的方法。
其实那个其实那个 curriculum 我觉得可以翻译成课程，也可以理解成大纲。对 EYFS 应该就是它的早期，它应该是早期基础教育阶段，应该是 early year foundation stage。然后他说第一个是就是我们孔子说的因材施教而已，对吧？我觉得就是因材施教。然后现在只有法语老师和英语老师会在网上记录他们的观察，然后给孩子做计划。我们现在没有做，但是有可能你们将来会做，所以要了解他是怎么做的。就是要根据小孩子，每一个小孩子都会有不同的计划，然后制定不同的计划，然后看他能不能达到。如果达到这个能力之后，又给他做新的计划。我觉得就是他说的那个 warm water 那个观念，就是和因材施教一样的。那个理论你听明白了吗，孟非？他说的是，我们想要拿一杯温水，取决于你有2个办法。第一个，如果你是一杯滚烫的热水，那么你就要倒冷水进去。如果你拥有的是一杯滚烫的热水，你就需要倒冷水进去。所以需要得到热水，取决于你的水，你已经拥有的水是什么样的状态。然后孩子的学习阶段，他举的例子是，孩子最开始只是会对声音有印象，然后声音之后就是感觉到意思，意思了之后，在一个情境当中，他就知道怎么运用了。比如说，你先告诉他，先会用手指数到5，然后慢慢的他知道5会比2和3比1的多，这是一个过程，就是他们的学习成一个进步的过程吧。我大概理解的是这样，你们觉得还有什么补充的吗？没有了。
Great, perfect. Thank you very much. So what we've just started talking about is the idea of a unique child. So every child is unique. That's what we're talking about. And that is the first of the principles. So we're going to just look at this handout. So we have four principles. So here we see it's the early year foundation stage principles. So that's the title. And we're just looking at the first one, a unique child. There are 4 different principles, and if we look at just the headings, we've got the unique child, which we've talked about a little bit. We're going to continue to talk about that. Afterwards, we will talk about positive relationships. Afterwards, we will talk about enabling environments. So the first 3 are things that we can do, in a way. And then, so if we have a unique child, and we have a positive relationship, and we create an enabling environment, then we have learning and development. So it's a little bit like maths. Unique child plus positive relationship plus enabling environment equals learning and development. Does that make sense? Can you say that in Chinese?
独一无二的孩子加积极健康的情绪和这个是什么？sorry， 独一无二的孩子，积极健康的关系，再加
能够激发他们的
环境等于学习和进步发展。相当于数学，
So we've been talking a little bit about the unique child, so we can read it maybe together.
Yeah.
So the first one is child development. So there is child development. We've talked about the children will learn, and then we want them to be skillful communicators. So you were saying sometimes that if a child is crying, you can feel anxious, but actually that's the first step of being a communicator. And actually communication is something we take very seriously because we're teaching them 3 languages. So we really recognize the importance of communication. And then also a competent learner. So that really means that we believe that children can learn.
Yeah.
Can you say that maybe in Mandarin?
对，学呢，他说是他们希望，尤其是在我们幼儿园是一个多语言环境，所以更希望孩子能够成为有社交技巧的交流者。然后你刚刚说小孩哭的时候会很焦虑，但实际上这是交流的第一步，哭是交流的第一步。
So then another responsibility we have in this principle of unique child is inclusive practice.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That the first one is equality and diversity.
Yeah.
And I think you do an online training. Is that right? Did you do an online training one?
Yeah, we did about equality and diversity.
So this is something that is really important. It comes up in British values, and it's part of our. It's firstly the law requires it, but also it's really important to us as the values in our nursery. We really believe in this. So simply, everyone is equal. So it doesn't matter if you're black or white or Chinese or French or South American, or if you're Jewish, or if your parents are Muslim, or if you live in a family with only one mother but no father lives with you, or if you have 2 mothers, or 2 fathers, or divorced parents, or if you are disabled, so maybe a child can't walk and will never be able to walk, or maybe if the parents have a problem, a physical problem or a mental development problem. It doesn't matter who you are, everyone is different. And actually, there is probably no such thing as normal. Everyone is different in some ways. Some children are different in many big ways, and some parents are different, and the teachers are different. Everyone is different, and everyone is important. Everyone is human. So the first thing is we want to respect everyone, and it's so important. We will send you. You will do an online training on this. So that is equality and diversity.
我觉得这就和我们的那个成语有关，就是海纳百川，兼容并包。你觉得是这个意思吗？老师、孩子，不管你的背景是什么，都是一样的。所以我们就是得到平等的对待，以及要拥有这种 每个人都是平等的这种价值观，这不仅是法律要求的，而且也是我们幼儿园非常重视的一点。还有什么补充的吗？
Okay, great. Then we have children's entitlements. So children have the right to learn. They have human rights as well. Just because a child is young does not mean that they do not have the right for a certain amount of freedom to express their emotions, to express their preferences, what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
So sometimes we can think of children as maybe in a busy family. We don't have time to think that the child has preferences because we have to do something different. But actually, the United Nations declared human rights for everyone, which includes children. So children have all the rights of adults.
我觉得这个它是讲孩子的权利和自由，对吧？所以不能因为他是小孩子，所以他就没有和其他成年人一样的权利，他拥有教育的权利、人权、自由权、表达的所有的自由。
And then we also have the Child Act in the UK, which gives children rights and protections as well.
应该这是相当于英国的未成年人保护法。
And then early support. So this is very interesting, that if a child does have a problem with development, we would often call it a special educational need. If a child has a special educational need, the younger we start helping the child, the better the child will do. If we make no special support and we wait until the child is 10, it can be very late. So maybe a child with some help will be able to learn later to read. For example, if a child has autism, autistic children actually are very good, often, at reading. But if the emotional problems that come with autism are not given any support, then maybe the child will always be pushed on the side of the classroom, and then later will not really be able to learn to read because the child is not allowed in the classroom, for example. Instead, if we offer a lot of support so that the child can, with support, learn to understand his or her emotions and the emotions of other children, then the child will be able to be integrated in the classroom and will be able to learn to read like the other children. So it's really important that we provide early support.
他刚刚讲了一个就是special education need 就是特殊的教育需求，他一般缩写，他们会把它变成缩写，变成 SEN。然后他说，如果是孩子有，刚刚你们听到孤独症那个单词了没有？自闭症，对 ，autism， 自闭症。然后他说，如果是孩子有自闭症的话，他如果没有他的情绪没有及时得到理解，那么他很可能在教室里会被边缘化，最后会被隔离的这种状态。所以孩子我们越早干涉，对他的帮助就越大。孩子我们要尝试去理解他的所有情绪，让他融入到整个班级，能够得到非常好的发展以及学习。
Great, thank you. Okay, so that's inclusive practice, and the next one is 1.3, keeping safe. So of course we want the children to be safe and protected, obviously. So one of the umbrellas of responsibility that we had on, can I use this one? So one of the umbrellas, the third one is health and safety. So that's really what we're talking about here. It's keeping the children safe and protected. That's one of our responsibilities. And then for a child then, the next one is discovering boundaries. So with boundaries, it's understanding when they must stop. For example, on the road, they can walk on the pavement, but they must not go where the cars are. So that's an example of a boundary. Another boundary might be it's okay to start to walk on the stairs when they're very young, but maybe they have to hold on to something. Or if it's a slide, then maybe an older child learns that they can use the slide, but they mustn't go off the sides. That's another physical boundary. We don't use fire in the nursery, but if there was a fire, the child must learn the boundary that they can get close to a certain distance where it's warm, but not too close where it's dangerous. So that's another boundary. But boundaries can also be about actions. So we don't throw things inside the nursery, but maybe it's okay to throw a ball outside. So there's a boundary as to where you are and how you behave. Another boundary, which some children will really struggle with, is you're not allowed to bite other children, for example, and you're not allowed to scratch other children. So if a child is frustrated and they haven't learnt to share yet, or to take turns, which is at this age when a child shares, really they take turns. If they haven't learned how to take turns, they might be frustrated and scratch or push or pull, and that's a boundary. We have golden rules, which we will talk about at some point, but the nursery has golden rules, and that is a set of boundaries. So we are gentle, which is a positive version, and the boundary is we don't scratch, we don't push. So later, hopefully, we will have time, probably not today, but we will talk about our positive behaviour policy. And because we're talking about boundaries, it's a really good time to mention the positive behaviour policy. It is very tempting to always say no. So stop or no. But actually, a child needs to learn what to do. And especially if a child is pushing another child or wants to bite another child, the reason is the child is frustrated. So saying no and stop does not help the child understand the frustration. It is not a useful tool for the child just to hear stop. So we have a positive behaviour policy where we try to encourage the behaviour that we want. So we understand the child's emotion and say, you're frustrated, you want to use this. We will take turns. So your friend can use it now, and then afterwards it will be your turn. So you have to wait and you can do something else, but then we will come back and it will be your turn. So then the child has energy. And if it stops, if the child has to stop all the time, it just gets more and more frustrating. But if we teach the child how to use the energy and do something else, it's more satisfying for the child and much more effective. And they learn about their emotion, and they learn, it's the first step, I suppose, in problem solving. I can't do this, but I can do that. So boundaries are very important to keep a child safe, physically safe. There's also something about an emotional boundary, and always we try to use the positive behaviour. So we, for example, if a child wants to run onto the road, of course we say stop, but then we also explain, stay on the pavement. Then the child knows what they can do, instead of just stop. So we try to provide the positive action, not just the boundary.
如果有什么你们可以补充我啊。我觉得他最开始他说的是保障安全，第一个就是要小孩有被保护的感觉，有安全感，不说了嘛。第二个是探索这个界限，他提到2点，第一个是对身体上的一个界限。身体上，比如说他过马路的时候，他知道红灯的时候不能走。然后在幼儿园有滑滑梯，滑滑梯的时候那个界限是什么呢？你可以滑，但是你不能。就是在边边上滑，这样很容易就摔倒。幼儿园是不能用火的，但是如果说用了有这个东西，那么他需要知道，如果你隔得太近，你就会受伤害，就你就不能隔得太，就是之类的，反正就是我们所说的一个界限。还有就是另外一个是情绪上的一个界限，我觉得是就是精神方面的一个界限，就是你应该要知道你在哪儿，然后你要知道你的行为应该是怎样的。比如说在幼儿园。他能不能就是抢小孩的东西，能不能在幼儿园扔东西，这些都是有界限的。而这个界限在幼儿园通过他们的那个 golden rule， 就是发译过来是 黄金法则。但我个人觉得就是咱们中国学校的班规嘛，对，小孩通过这个知道了他的所有的一切界限。然后除了这种身体上的界限，还有情绪上的这些界限之外，我们老师更应该做的是一种叫做积极行为政策。如果小孩他只是听到不行、停下这些话的话，他的能量，他身上的这些情绪还是没有，得到这种问题还是没有得到解决。所以小孩子更应该知道做什么，而不应该只是听到停、不行这种话，这是很负面的。所以每一次我们就应该，当小孩有这样的一些行为，就是比如说在探索界限的行为的时候，我们除了说不要这样，比如说过马路的时候不能走，我们更应该告诉他待在人行道上，等绿灯，有很多积极的暗示，这才是他们所提倡的一种很好的教师的积极行为政策，大概是这个意思。还有补充的吗？
非常好。
Great, thank you very much. Can you think of any boundaries that you saw on your first day?
Okay, yeah, just I mentioned, keep their hands free when they upstairs. It's a boundary.
I'm not sure I understand. Could you explain maybe in Mandarin
就
and
是
speak loud enough?
就是在上那个楼梯的时候，就手里不能拿东西，如果拿东西他会摔倒，可以吗？
对。
When the children upstairs, we
To
should
go outside or
inside
inside on the
or
stairs?
outside. We should keep their hands free.
Empty.
Empty. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. Empty. Yeah.
Yes. So when they're going up the stairs, their hands should be empty,
Empty.
so they can hold on.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes, and they eat their toys. You don't know ever. You shouldn't just say no, and you can teach them how to play the toys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Very good.
粉笔是
choke.
Yesterday I noticed that there is a little boy. He eats the choke. The choke. I think the choke is can't eat here, right? The choke. 这里的粉笔是不能吃的，是。
We can't eat the
We
choke.
can't eat the choke.
So that's the choke is on the ground. They can take away, and the children don't know, so they were putting into their mouths. So when I saw this, I came to the boy and told him, don't eat this can't, and I gave him another thing to play, and I show him put the choke into the basket. I do this action twice, and he copied it, just put into the basket, and then, but I found 2 times he eats the choke.
Yeah.
So maybe he will do this again, but I think this need time and need to be patient to teach, to tell him. And I found that there is an emotion boundary. When the children cry, and I found that some teacher is good at to comfort them, to tell them you're fine, and I know what you want to do, and give them another advice to do. For example, there is a boy who wake up and he went to his mom, so he go to the door, want to open the door and cry, and the other teacher come to him and comfort and say something to comfort and try to distract. So I think this is a good way.
Yeah. So there are two things there. The first one is the boundary. The boundary is the children cannot leave the classroom in the middle of the day. So that's the boundary. And then something that is not a boundary is what we do. So the emotional support and then the distraction. And then often we have pictures of the parents in the classroom. For the new children, that can be a big comfort to see the picture of their parents.
I saw there is a teacher gave him the picture.
Young children really enjoy that. So that's not a boundary, but it's a very good technique. Great, I think you've understood the boundaries. And then the last one of keeping safe is making choices. So here it's really quite obvious. Children need to know how to make choices. And then also, there's an emotional side to that, to choose. But then also there is a practical about keeping safe. Because in all our lives we will have choices for how we eat. Do we do physical exercise? Do we cross the road without looking? Do we spend time with people who are dangerous? Do we, as adults, do we drink too much? We have choices from when you're very young until you're very old. And part of keeping safe is knowing how to make the right choice to keep yourself safe. So here, making choices is a big thing, but in this example, it's about keeping safe. And to be able to keep ourselves safe, we need to learn how to make choices. Because if we never choose anything, then we won't be able to be safe in the future.
他刚刚说的是，我觉得他讲的重点就是为了安全。我们从小到大，我们都有非常多的选择。我们过马路的时候要不要看周围？我们要不要就是和一些很危险的人待在一起？我们要不要喝太多的酒？这都是我们从小到大都有很多选择。而为了保证安全，小孩需要知道怎样做选择。所以他在幼儿园做选择的一个首要前提就是为了安全。你们觉得是这个意思吗？还有没有什么补充的？
那会不会还有一层含义就是，我们安全也是做选择的前提。
对，我就是想表达这个。对。
What was that?
I asked her whether she has something to add. Whether I translated all the meaning. She added that the safety is the priority to making choice.
Absolutely.
To make choice. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the final one is health and well-being. So we want the children to grow and develop. So we gave examples, and we will look at this soon, about how children learn and develop. So at the beginning they can't do very much, and they learn to do more and more in many different areas. And so this is physical growth and also just mental growth and capability. And then we're aware that some children will have special educational needs. We talked about that already, but that comes also under health and well-being. So if a child has a disability, or if they have an allergy, that's a good example. If they have an allergy, we have to be careful, but they also have to learn when they're old enough so that they can protect themselves. They have to understand their own allergies so that they can keep safe.
他刚刚讲到就是，我觉得最后一点就是健康。健康就分两方面嘛，身心的发展，对不对？身体的和心理的。然后他刚刚讲到说，有一个最重要的是在幼儿园要知道小孩对什么过敏，刚刚说到那个词，然后这样他们长大的时候就会一步一步长大，知道怎么保护自己，不会受到这些过敏的这些危害的。好的，还有补充吗？
Thank you. So the next one is physical well-being. So that's quite obvious. We have to eat well, we have to exercise and move, and really that's it. It's really just we have to look after our body. So I guess we have to brush our teeth, we have to wash our hands. All of that is physical well-being.
刚刚讲的就是，身体健康，要知道要刷牙，要洗手，就是之类的。好像我觉得差不多就是这些，是吗？还有吗？没有。
And then we talked about in the umbrellas of responsibilities, this one. The first one is safeguarding, and one of the areas of abuse is physical abuse. So here again, the safeguarding, just with health and well-being, we have a responsibility to check that there is not physical abuse. There are lots of other types of abuse as well, but it is just relevant to this point.
和这一点相关的就是我们所学的你庇护下的责任的那一点，那个身体虐待，所以我们有责任去检查小孩的身体健康，是否和这个方面有关，比如说有没有受到虐待啊之类的，就是和这一点有关。
And then the final one is emotional well-being. So a child must learn to understand his and her own emotions. Also other children's, but here we're talking about the unique child, so they have to understand their own emotions and learn to express them. And then also with safeguarding, we have a responsibility to check for emotional abuse.
小孩需要，这一点是心理健康。小孩应该要学会怎样去理解他们自己的情绪，以及表达自己的情绪。与之相关的呢，也就是这个安全保护政策之下的这个情绪，精神虐待，对吧
So that's the end of the unique child. So on this one, we learned that each child is different. They can learn. It doesn't matter if they're different. We will support them. We want them to be safe. We want them to be healthy and to have good well-being. So that's the first thing. We respect a child. We see the child as being unique. Perfect?
我觉得就是我们中国的成语“因材施教，身心健康”，同意吗？对。We try to use some Chinese idioms to connect to this one and with Chinese culture.
Great.
Yeah, because Confucius, he said something similar to this.
Yeah, I don't know much about Confucius. Did he also say that younger people must always listen to older people?
Just a part.
It's just a part.
Yes.
So on the one hand, we have a boundary, and we have teaching, but then we also have the children's entitlements and children's rights, which I don't know much about Confucius, but sometimes I think historically the children's rights were maybe forgotten a little bit. So it's important that we also add that as well.
But he is also like, as an educator, he also talk about some principles, like you said, every child is unique.
Yeah.
So every teacher needs to find out different ways according to their interests. That's exactly match.
Perfect. Perfect.
So not the old-fashioned bad ones, but we're trying to think about these good principles.
It's very helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's unique child. You were at the nursery yesterday, so can you notice that the children were different?
Yeah.
Do you want to just give an example?
For example, the first girl I met, I play with her. She's name is Alice. She is very quiet, shy, but after half day, I noticed that she is good at observe. She is quiet, but she sit in a place to observe what's happened, and sometimes she will smile. For example, if some children are happy, and she can feel happy. She just don't want to say too much. She just want to observe. This is very interesting, and I can feel some similar with me. Me too. And another boy, Lucas, he is very energy, and he likes speak, he likes smile, but also he likes cry. He likes crying. There is one boy. He when he saw some child is cry, he will come to and share the toy or share another something to play with them to make them happy. So I feel this boy is very good. He's so warmly, he's so friendly. So every children is different, is unique, and some children like music. When the teacher show them the music to play the music, to play guitar, and some children just sit down and enjoy the music, but some children don't like. Some child don't like just play far away. So at first I want to ask her or she, ask he or she to come with us, but the other teacher said, just let him alone. Never mind.
Never mind.
Yes.
Great. Perfect. So that's the uni child.
Yes.
So now we're going to go on to positive relationships. So this is the second principle. Of the EYFS. So the first one is we have to respect each other. And here we have 3 points. We have to understand that other people have feelings. So this could be that children have to understand that each other have feelings. And we have to understand that the children have feelings. And I mentioned role modeling before. So of course we have to understand that the other teachers have feelings. And children learn a lot by observing, as you were just saying. And so we have to respect the other teachers and be a good role model, and help the children understand their own emotions and that the other children have emotions as well. That's the first one. Second one is friendships. Friendship is a key part of life for most people. And it is not always easy. So we have to learn how to be friends. That maybe we want to be friends with someone, but the children don't want to take it in turns. But if we want to have friends, we have to take it in turns and enjoy, play together. And then here, I've mentioned it already, but the professional relationship. So they see us as the role models. So that's respecting each other. We have to create. So the environment, the positive relationship here is part of human growth as well. So it's a little bit, Uni Child is about us, and positive relationship is about community really, and about playing and being with other people. And at this age we have to teach it, and the children have to learn.
他刚刚讲，这第二点是互相尊重，第一点是要互相理解彼此的感受，不仅仅是包括小孩要互相理解自己彼此的感受，还有老师需要去理解小孩的感受，还有一个就是老师互相之间也应该理解和尊重，因为他提到一个词是榜样，榜样的话就是要小孩会通过他们的观察去学到更多东西，尤其是在老师之间的交流。第二点是友谊，他说到说友谊是许多人人生当中很重要的一个环节，怎样小孩应该学会怎样去成为朋友。但在幼儿园呢，通常会需要轮流的去交朋友，因为我可以和你，然后另外一个人也想和你交朋友，这也是一种需要学会的一个过程。他说这种交流更像是一种人性教育，是这样说的吗？因为当他们的身体健康之后，然后慢慢的就需要学会情绪上的表达、社交上的能力。他第三个专业这个上面的关系，他讲了什么了吗？我好像没有听到。就是这个啊，好。
Perfect. Thank you very much. So the next one is parents as partners. So the parents of the children are very important to us in the nursery as well. So the first one is that we must respect diversity. So we talked about equal opportunities earlier, and you will do a training, and this includes also respect for diversity of the parents. So it doesn't matter what their religion is, what their sexuality is, what their lifestyle is, as long as there is no safeguarding problem, as long as there's no abuse, then many families live in different ways, and we have to respect all of them. So that's the first one.
第二点是家长的配合，第一点是尊重他家长背景的多元化，不论他们的宗教是什么，或者其他的各种信仰，我们都应该尊重家长，除非他刚刚说到一个与那个你庇护下的责任当中的安全保护政策有关，如果小孩受到了虐待，那另当别论。但是我们就应该尊重所有的家长，都是他们拥有共同平等的权利。
And there are other areas in diversity. So, of course, there is the race. It doesn't matter what nationality or race or language the family is. It doesn't matter if they're married or not married. We respect them if they're pregnant or if they're not pregnant. Of course, there is health and safety that we must be careful of if a mother is pregnant, but we respect all the mothers and the fathers. And there are just many different areas. And basically, if you can think of something that a person can be different, we respect them anyway.
尤其是他讲的那个 diversity 多元化、多样性，其实就是说，不管家长的还是刚刚的问题，他的国籍、他的肤色、他的婚姻状态，当然他是否怀孕或者是未婚妈妈之类的，当然在这一点，如果怀孕了，我们会考虑到那个健康与安全那一点，但是大环境下不同的领域之内，我们都应该尊重家长所有的一些多样性。如果你想每个人都是不同的，那么这个问题就不会是问题了。
So if a man has some piercings or tattoos or a funny haircut or a different color haircut or they dress in a different way, they're still the parents of our children, and we must teach the children that we respect everyone. So we have to show it. Maybe inside we're surprised, but we must show respect because it's an important human value, and we want to teach the children because we're role models.
Yeah, I think it's very important for our Chinese teacher because we are from the kind of
Conservative.
Yeah. 他刚刚说，如果是家长有那个什么戴不同的耳钉啊，到处唇环、舌环，或者是不同的那个纹身，还有奇装异服，无论他们是怎样的，我们都应该尊重他们的多样性。对，我们就是他孩子的榜样，我们怎么做，孩子就会怎么学。我觉得是这个意思。
And then maybe some of our parents have special educational needs. Maybe a parent could be autistic, or have some other disability or special need. But probably some of the most clever geniuses in the world probably had very bad social skills. Some of the best mathematicians maybe were not very good at eye contact or friendship. Maybe they were a little bit rude to people, but they were maybe a brilliant person. So even if we find a parent surprising in their behavior, they're still a human being. They still have feelings and they still have abilities.
Yeah.
So maybe we can't see the strengths and we only see something that is surprising. But we respect them and we always treat them with respect, and we're patient and we're calm and we show them respect, even if they don't show us respect.
他这里讲的是说，有些家长他们可能会有一些特殊的教育需求，比如说有些家长可能是孤独症的、自闭症的，有一些家长可能他们是非常成功的数学家，但是他们的社交能力有问题，也许他都不能进行简单的眼神接触。但是我们不能去或者有些家长有残疾的，但是我们不能歧视。也许我们看不见这些家长的能力，我们只看见我们觉得很奇怪的部分，但是。他就说，我们需要尊重和耐心的对待所有的家长，即使有的时候我们家长不尊重我们。
Thank you. So the next point is communication. So we're talking about parents as partners. We often call this whole section partnership with parents, and communication is an amazing key because
Sorry, could you please? We also called it what? Sorry.
all of this is partnership with parents.
Thank you.
The whole of 2.2 is partnership with parents as well. So we have communication. So communication goes both ways. The first thing you will notice is that parents want information. They're curious. What has my child done today?
Yeah.
What are they able to do? Are they happy? So maybe a child, especially a new child, will cry in the morning when their parent leaves. So it's important for us to communicate with the parents that the child has not cried all day. Because if they see the child cry in the morning, and often at the end of the day when they're collected for a new child, that can be very emotional when they see their parent again. They're happy, but somehow they cry because it's emotional. They realise they've been without their parent, they realise they missed their parent. So maybe the parent sees the child cry in the morning and cry in the afternoon, and so they imagine the child has cried all day. So we have to communicate and tell them what their child has done. You will see a little training video later, maybe on Monday, with Pauline, which talks about communication with parents. So that's the first thing, is the parents want to know what their child, and not just about the emotional state, but what activities have they done? Did they eat their lunch? Did they enjoy themselves? So communication is very important. We have, for the younger children, we fill in a form and we say how much the children have eaten, and maybe you will be asked to help fill in those and ask a teacher to explain. Sometimes we put a percentage, say 50% of the pasta, for example, or some nurseries or some rooms put a little, medium or a lot. So there are different ways that each nursery or each room communicates. So just, you will find out, someone will show you. But we know, and so that's about food, about if they've slept. Another important thing, which is both health and safety and communication, is if a child has an accident. So we fill in an accident form and we put a witness as well if a child has an accident, so we explain what happened. And an accident could be something big or small. A child falls over and hurts their knee, for example. Maybe they cry, but it's not, you don't think, oh, it's not a big thing, but actually we should tell the parent what happened. So all of that is communication. And then there's communication in the opposite direction that we receive. And that is useful information. We talked about the unique child, and children have different interests. So it's interesting to hear what they do at home. Did they go to the museum? Is a grandparent coming to visit? Is the mother just had a little child? Did the mother give birth to a baby? Is a grandparent staying with them? So changes at home might change the behaviour of a child. So if we know what is happening at home, we can understand the emotion of the child. I think this is maybe a good example. So imagine as an adult that someone stole your mobile phone. How would you feel? How would you feel if someone stole your mobile phone?
就是偷走了。
对。
他是想让我。
那你感觉你会怎么做？你什么感受？有人偷了你的手机。
也很着急。Sorry.
You can answer in Chinese.
Worry, sad.
Angry for me. It happened to me actually.
And you were angry?
I was so angry.
It happened to me. I was really angry. Someone took my phone from me in the street. For no reason. I was really angry and frustrated. And I'll be honest, I cried a little bit. Because I was so frustrated. I didn't have a map. I couldn't phone my friend to say I was going to be late. I had to do many things,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do any of them. It was very frustrating.
Yeah.
And I felt a little bit overwhelmed on the emotion. I felt trapped and powerless, and I hate those feelings. It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And then it took a while before I could get a new phone and a new SIM card, and I didn't have time, and I had to go to work, and I had to do all these things, and I was probably a little bit more impatient during the day in the work meeting, because I didn't have my phone, and I knew I had to do it, and it made everything complicated. It was very frustrating. But I'm an adult, and I have many life skills, and I have the ability to buy a new phone. I have the ability and power to buy a new phone. I have the choice to cancel my evening plans and go to the shop. A child does not have the power to buy a new toy. A child does not have the ability or the money to buy a new toy. The child does not have the power to say, let's cancel dinner. I want to find a new toy. So something that might seem very small, I'm really talking about the emotional development of a child, but something that might seem very small, for example, a child lost his favourite toy, or the father or mother lost their favourite bunny in the car on the weekend, can be a big emotional event for a child. And the children do not have life skills like we have. So the information that a parent tells us, oh, we lost his favourite bunny, or we lost her favourite teddy bear this weekend or this morning, is really, really important information. Because you felt angry. For a child, it is so much more complicated because they are also confused and they are powerless. And that child will probably not sleep well at nap time. And so we need to have extra compassion for the child and understand that for them this is a traumatic event. Probably much more traumatic than if you had your mobile phone stolen. So with that understanding, we can realize why the communication from the parents is so important.
2.2他讲的是全部就是与家长的配合，是不是应该从交流这一点讲？communication 对吧？然后他说，家长总是会非常好奇的，比如说小孩在幼儿园做了些什么，他们的能力怎么样，然后他们开不开心，有没有哭，这些都是家长非常好奇的。所以也许尤其是对于新到幼儿园的小孩子，新来的，有可能他们说离开父母的怀抱，可能会担心他上午有没有哭，下午有没有哭，会不会一天都在哭，这都是他们急需知道的一些信息。所以作为老师，我们就需要告知家长这些信息，以及不仅仅是情绪上的，更多的是他在幼儿园做了什么，做了哪些活动。在幼儿园有一些表格，第一个是有一个叫食物的，他今天吃了什么，吃了哪些东西。然后有些幼儿园他们会用百分数来表示，吃了多少。有些幼儿园他们会用大中小这种尺寸上，但我们幼儿园就是打勾勾和打叉叉或者写一些话。然后还有一些是一个是睡眠表，就是有没有睡觉啊，睡了多久啊，从几点开始睡的，这都是非常具体的信息。还有一个是事故表。事故表就是小孩今天发生了什么事情，然后同时你在填写事故表的时候，你还需要一个证人老师，也就是那个上面需要2个老师的签字，一个写的，然后一个是观察到的，他说是 witness， 肯定就是证人嘛，我也不知道怎么翻译的更好。然后所以也许你认为这件事情很小，小孩就哭了一下而已，但是家长需要被告知。同时反过来说，我们也有被告知的一些权利。因为小孩在家里的一些变化可能会被带到幼儿园来，小孩他比如说在家里他有没有去过博物馆啊，或者妈妈，我这里写的妈妈我忘记是什么了。
有没有 带更小的孩子或者
哦，妈妈有
怀孕
没有怀孕，有没有新宝宝，还有爷爷奶奶是否有来看他们，或者说和爷爷奶奶是否是住在一起的，这些他在家里面的所有的行为其实都会带到家里。然后他就举了手机被偷的这个事情嘛，他手机被偷之后，他就非常生气，然后是感觉到是被掉进陷阱了，我不知道怎么翻译了。然后还说，但是因为我们作为成年人，我们拥有我们的生存技巧与能力，所以我们可以取消已经订好的晚餐，我们可以重新去买手机，我们可以告知朋友或者之类的所有，我们可以，我们
解决问题，
可以给自己解决问题。但是小孩子他是没有这种生活技能的，也许他爸爸妈妈会轻描淡写的说他最喜欢的玩具掉了，有可能说。就是找不到了。这从父母亲给的情绪当中，这些信息当中，我们需要给这些也许小孩他可能头天晚上没有睡好之类的，因为对于小孩来说，这种情绪是更加复杂的。他比起生气来说，他可能是更多的是困惑。这也许丢失最喜爱的玩具，对他来说是一种伤痛性的事件。他说了那个 traumatic event，所以这个时候我们需要给小孩更多的同情，更多的关心。有补充的吗？
That's great, thank you very much. And then some other things like moving house can be a major event for a child. You've moved to England recently. Was everything about moving to England fun, or was it stressful, or was there any anxiety for you?
For me, it's fun.
It's fine.
Yeah, when I was a child, if I go to stay to my relatives' home 1 month or 1 week, that is a big disaster.
Yeah. And so we have many international families, so they could be moving houses from a different country, or even within London, they can move from one flat to another flat. So that's something quite big in a child's life. Even changing bedrooms can be quite a big event, or changing classrooms as they get older. All of these things can be stressful or confusing. So that's why the communication is so important. It can also be positive. So maybe the parent can say, this girl has started playing with cars, or this boy is interested in dinosaurs. So that could also be useful information that I'll talk about soon. But all of that, we must just listen to the parents.
我们应该要聆听家长。
然后有很多有用的信息。
对，但是他刚刚提到说搬家可能也会是一件很有压力以及很困惑的事情，因为在幼儿园有很多跨国家庭、国际化的家庭，他们有可能从不同的国家搬到不同的国家，也可能从这个公寓搬到那个公寓，因为和我们国家确实是不太一样啊。所以聆听家长，然后是非常重要的。有可能说小孩从不同的班级到。比如说他从
换了个教室，
还要换寝室什么，
换床，
但你也可以得到一些很积极的信息，比如说家长会说，这小孩开始对恐龙感兴趣了，这小孩在讲班里的一些什么什么事情，是这个意思吗？好，是的。
谢谢。
谢谢。
And the next one is learning together. So here it's really about communication. And if we hear what is effective at home, maybe we can use the same technique. So if we hear that a child cries at home and the mother sings this particular song and it helps, then maybe the English teachers can say, or whichever language the song is, maybe we can use the same song at the nursery. Or if they say, oh, at mealtime I do this and that helps my child, then maybe we can copy something from home. And the other way, because often the children are much better at trying, for example, new food at the nursery, so we can share that information with the parents to help them. Or if we find a good effective technique, such as singing a song, I've already used as an example, but maybe there's an activity that a child is really enjoying that we're using, then we can tell the parents and they can do the same activity at home. So we want to work together, And then it is especially important if a child has special educational needs or has challenging behaviour. We don't talk about good and bad behaviour. That is a judgment. Instead, we talk about challenging behaviour because we find it challenging. So we own the emotion, we own the reaction, saying that's my reaction. For the child, maybe it's very satisfying to hit other children. The child is frustrated and they hit the other child, maybe that child thinks it's satisfying. So they don't think it's bad behaviour, but we find it challenging and we want to teach other values. So we will use our positive behaviour policy to try to give the child something better to do. So if we find something that is effective, we try to tell the parents what we have done that works, so that they can try the same technique. So, for example, if a child is biting, we don't just say no, no, no. There is a positive behaviour policy. Maybe the parents are just saying no, 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 and so the child gets more and more frustrated. So we try to, it's a little bit teaching the parents, but also just working together, so we use the same technique. So maybe a parent will say no, 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 okay, because the parent is frustrated and it's tiring to make the boundary. So if we explain the technique that we use, if they use the same technique, it's easier to help the child change their behaviour. Okay, did you all understand?
Yeah.
Would you like to explain that to me in Mandarin? Can you explain that to me in Mandarin?
就是说，我们就一些关于处理问题更好的技巧，我们可以相互学习，跟孩子、跟家长，就具体的举例子不记得，就是说，如果你处理好了一个东西，你可以，这个方面你做得很好，你可以告诉家长，然后也可以跟家长学，他们在家就情绪或者什么问题，处理很好的时候，这例子没记得。
对，但是他还有，但是他还说到一点，就是不仅我们可以，因为他说的最后一点是这样说的，是说，因为对于家长来说，可能设定很多的限制，很累人，因为一直说 no no no， 也许到最后他就愿意妥协，他就说 OK 了。但是我们可以他说有一点像教家长做这种事情，但更多的是一种共同学习，因为我们会告诉他，在幼儿园做这件事情是有效的，你可以在家里也试一试。同样的，我们相反过来，我们也可以从家长那里知道很多有效的方法，比如说小孩在家里特别喜欢一首特殊的歌，或者说吃饭的时候这个怎么做他喜欢吃，还有一些在家里做一些很有效的活动，他们都可以得知这些信息之后，可以双方配合，会让小孩取得更大的进步。他还讲了一个特殊教育的那个，你有听到吗？
特殊教育哪个？
特殊需要教育特殊教育需要的孩子，没有听到？
没有。
OK。这是那个，sorry, can I ask because she didn't talk about the special education needs, both of them missed that. Can I explain? 他讲了一个特殊教育的，还有一个叫 challenge behavior 的那个，就是那个，对这个人，他说这个就是因为我们为什么要说是他挑战性的小孩，我们不会说调皮的小孩或者坏的行为，因为这是一种评价性的话语。我们不这样说，我们说 challenge 是因为对于我们来说这是一件很有挑战的事情，所以我们在这个时候，他刚刚讲到的那个积极行为政策，就是一样的，小孩发生这些行为，因为他们会，比如说他们为什么会做那些事情，我们会觉得是调皮的，因为他们自己内心会感到满足，他们自己是不知道的。对于我们来说，就应该去积极的去想一些除了说不行停止以外，更多一些积极的鼓励的政策话语和家长，然后配合，然后接下来就是你后面说的那个，
积极的引导，告诉他们可以做什么。
是的。
Great. So probably at the beginning, you won't have, especially if you're new, you won't have a direct, much communication with the parents, I suppose. But just listen to what the other teachers say. But probably you will hear teachers say, oh, Oscar's mother told us ABC. So then you must listen to that because it has the information. Okay, so that's parents as partners or partnership with parents. Okay, so the next one is supporting learning. So here we have the positive interactions. So if we want the children to learn, they must have a good experience with you. If it's always frustrating, they will not learn anything. This could also include giving emotional support. So for example, with a younger child, you might need to hug them. I think maybe one of you had a question about if the child is too close. So if a child needs emotional support, you can hug a child, no problem. However, maybe you have a good relationship with a child and you like hugging, but the child is quite happy doing a book or doing an activity. In that situation, you must not hug the child, because in that example, you want the hug, not the child, and that is different. We're here for the children. So if they need emotional support, we can hug them. If they don't need emotional support, we don't hug them. And just positive interactions is also about many things we have already discussed. Respecting the child, understanding a child's preferences, protecting children. All of these things are many different ways that we can have a positive relationship. This whole principle, this whole section is positive relationships. So that really here it's saying, well, the interaction must be positive as well. So we talked about the positive behavior policy. That's much more enjoyable for a child than saying no, stop, no, stop, no, stop. So that also is part of this positive interaction. Maybe Juan, you want to tell us this? See what you got.
这个他说的主要就是一些积极的，其实就是积极的行为引导。
积极互动。
对，积极的互动。举了一个例子，就是刚才我之前就困惑的是，如果他们比如说如何保持正确的距离，比如说他们来所求拥抱的时候，其实如果是他们要求，他们需要你的拥抱的时候，这个时候我们是可以去拥抱的。如果说最重要的就是不要把这个变成是我们需要他的拥抱，因为其实是我们只是一个，在他需要抚慰的时候，我们给他就可以了，也不需要过度的担心或者是过度的保持距离。另外一个就是也不要一直在跟孩子说 no， 说你不可以，这个不可以。其实这个我觉得是很打击他们的信心的。其实在说了不行的时候，我觉得马上要给他们一个回复，给他们一个信息是你可以做什么。就其实在这两者，在这个情况下，其实我说一点我自己的意思啊，是不是就类似于给他们做选择？因为这个既然不可以的话，其实有好的选择他是可以做的。因为我在给他提供这个，你可以做这些，他们马上就会选择这个，他们就知道自己该做什么了。
Yeah, she talks about some of her own idea that always giving the child more options. As a kind of positive behavior.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good example. Sometimes, for example, at lunchtime, a child does not want to sit down. So a good technique can be to say, do you want to sit next to me, or do you want to sit next to your friend? So sometimes if we give an A or B choice, it's much easier than you must sit down. That's a really good example, thank you. So the next one is listening to children. And so here we listen just in general. So what are they interested in? What do they enjoy? Because that is useful information for the next section, which is enabling environments. So we'll talk about that later, but the first thing is to get the information. So what do they like? What do they enjoy? What is happening in their life? So we must listen. And then also, listening to children is also part of safeguarding. We talked about the area of responsibility, the safeguarding policy. And one of the things that you will learn in your training is that we must listen. What are the children saying? Is it about their interests, or is there something worrying at home? Is there something surprising? So that's also part of our positive relationship. And oh yeah, I'll let you do that.
他刚刚就是说聆听的小孩嘛，聆听小孩有两方面的目的，第一个是为了下一步激发能力的环境，通过聆听小孩，知道小孩的兴趣爱好，他们所喜欢的一切。然后第二个部分是为了那个安全保护政策听力，如果你听到一些担忧的一些部分，也能很好的进行及时的采取措施。
Great. I forgot to say on the positive interactions on the previous section, I said it's okay to hug the children. Just a reminder of our two-person policy. This is not just for hugging, but in general we have a two-person policy wherever possible. So as much as possible, there'll be always two teachers together. And this is especially important if we're going to be hugging a child. Of course, if a child needs it, the child's needs come first, but it should always have two people. This protects the teacher's reputation as well as protecting the children. You can maybe just add that bit.
他说刚刚前面那一点积极的互动当中有一点他没有说，就是那个小孩的拥抱，不要忘记有一个两人政策，就是你任何时候和小孩拥抱的时候，要确保有另外一个人在场，这也是为了保护你的生命，也是为了保护小孩。
Great. And the final one is about effective teaching. So see, you might be doing an activity, any sort of activity or song or anything at all, and you see that it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, we have to adapt. So maybe we have an idea of doing one thing, but in the end we have to do something different because the children are not interested. And that is part of supporting learning. If they're not interested, they're not going to learn. So we can have one idea, but we have to listen to the children, observe the children, and just adapt as required. And then also notice, maybe you do a song that's too long, and you notice the other teachers do shorter songs, and that's better. So depending on the age group and depending on the children, their concentration might be short or longer. So to teach effectively, we must notice, does it work? And it's okay, don't be frustrated. Use it as useful information for yourself so that next time it's better. And maybe something that doesn't work today does work tomorrow, or something that works today doesn't work tomorrow. But just try to get as much information and notice, is it working? Or is it boring?
他讲的是有效教学，有效教学的话，也就是说在跟小孩进行学习的时候，或者你在给他们进行一些活动的时候，要想它是否有效。然后，它其实也是一种，它也是那个支持性学习的一部分。所以，我就他说的最多的是调整那个单词吧。如果不适合的话，就要积极的进行各环节的调整。但是你也要，也就是说还要有效反思，教学效果是否好，然后你还要反思。但是有些你的教学计划安排，也许他今天小孩不喜欢，可能明天就有效了，也有可能明天还是不行，就是要不停的进行一种反思，看一下你的教学效果是否达到，是否有效。还有吗？
Okay, so now the last section of key person of positive relationships is the key person. So key person is probably on the vocab lists.
Yeah, it is.
What is a key person in Mandarin?
关键负责的小孩其实是。
不是，是老师，不是小孩。
key person 就是关键负责的老师。一个老师他有负责带几个，他是几个小孩子的 key person。
对，你就。
Yeah? Great. So children have at least one key person. Often they have two, one in English and one in French. Because at the moment the Chinese teachers have a shorter shift and we're still introducing the program, we haven't made you key people. Maybe the people watching this video, we've changed it, so I don't know, in the future that might change. But a key person, the reason we have more than one is that we're open 10 hours a day, and nobody, maybe except the managers, work 10 hours a day. The managers are not supposed to work 10 hours a day, but sometimes they do. And so the key person should be the person who knows the child best. They should know the child's interests, their age, their abilities, and that's the first thing. And then they must have a secure attachment. That's the first point. Secure attachment of the key person means that the child trusts the key person. So, of course, we say hello to all the children, but there should be a little bit of a more intense, a deeper relationship between the key person and the key child. Each teacher will have many key children, and it is that responsibility of the key person to do written observations and planning and reports. And if there is a question about the child, the parent should ask the key person first. We do reports, we'll deal with that in a later section, but the reports, we have a meeting often with the parents to explain the report, and the key person should be there to explain. If we have an inspection, the inspectors will ask the key person the most questions about that child, and we have to know the child. And the secure attachment is only possible if we know our children. So even though you're not the key people at the moment, even though people watching the video, that might be different, you should still know the children, and that will help you. That will help you with everything, really.
他讲的这一个点就是关键老师，其实就相当于我们应怎么翻译啊？负责人嘛，负责老师。他是说每一个小孩至少都有一位负责老师，然后呢，一般在幼儿园有2位，一个英语的，一个法语的，所以这个老师应该是对小孩最了解的一个人，而且比起其他的老师来说，这个老师对于那个小孩来说，应该要有一种更多的安全感，他们会有和一种更深入的关系，包括因为是这个老师负责观察这个小孩，计划他的一切，然后写他的一切所有的一些需要的文字记录，以及他们有一个每学期结束之后有一个 report， 就相当于我们小学的那种通知书。当和家长开会的时候，他们会分别见面，给这个小孩所有关于这个小孩的一切都是由这个负责老师来解释的。包括，然后呢，另外一种情况就是，如果有督导、教学督导，就是其他比如说 offset 教学督导的人过来检查的话，关于这小孩的一切也是由这个老师来解释。然后，就算你不是这个小孩的负责老师，你也应该需要尝试去了解这些小孩，这对你在幼儿园的所有工作都是有帮助的。
Great. So one example is that you should probably also know this, but a key person should always know who is their oldest key child and who is their youngest key child, just to know where each child fits within the age group as well.
所以他刚刚说的是你也需要知道你的那些负责的小孩当中谁是最小的，谁是最大的，是这个意思吧
The next point in the key person is shared care. So the key person cannot do everything, because firstly that they don't work 10 hours a day. Also, a child might be taking part in an activity with another teacher, and also the children live at home. They don't live at the nursery and they don't live with the key person. So the key person has the responsibility to understand that many people look after the child. And so the key person might ask you questions like, how did it go in the park? So you might think that that is the key person asking you to see how you are doing as a teacher. And that is one part. But they might also be asking you because they want to know about the children. And also, if they've got questions, understanding that the parents, we talked about the communication with parents, well, the key person has this responsibility. If they have questions, maybe the behavior of the child has changed, or they're looking for ideas. So it's the key person's responsibility to ask the parents. So it's not just there is communication and we wait passively for it to happen. The key person will be active to take responsibility to understand this.
说这个是一个分享性的关系吧，因为小孩儿，首先他不可能这个负责老师不可能，整个10个小时都和这个小孩儿全都在一起，所以有些活动是和其他老师展开的。还有是小孩住在家里，并不是和这个负责老师在一起，所以这个老师呢，可能他需要知道，作为一个负责人，你应该要知道很多你的职责和一些对小孩的了解是需要通过其他老师来知道的。然后他还有一个刚刚讲的是和家长的交流，负责老师也需要主动的承担这种责任，去问问题。如果他对小孩有什么担心的话，这是他的责任的一部分，是这个意思吗？
And then the last one is independence. So we want to teach the children to be independent. We want to teach the children how to do things on their own.
Yeah.
And the key person has extra responsibilities for that. So obviously we have to support the children because they can't do everything, but the aim is to teach them so that they can do it. So this is the education side, not just the care side. We want them to learn to be able to do things.
第3点是独立，所以对于负责老师来说，教小孩学会独立是他们更多的一种责任，而且它不仅仅是只是照顾小孩这一方面，更多的是一种教育方面的。我觉得这是跟蒙特梭利的观念有关系吧，所以教会小孩独立，怎样去做好独立的完成一些事情。还有吗？没有了。
Great. So before we were doing unique child, and we've now finished positive relationships.
Yeah.
So we're halfway through the 4 principles. Good. So we did the unique child and positive relationships, and now we're going to do the enabling environments. So this is really about what we can do to prepare. The environment here is mostly about classroom. Also outside as well when we go to the park or the playground. So there is a cycle which is observation, assessment and planning. So this is what the teachers do. So the first thing is we start with a child. So start with a child means a unique child. It means we have to know the child's interests, know their ability and their area of development. So that's starting with a child. Should we do that bit?
第3点是激发能力的环境，然后第1点就是我们对小孩总是有这样一个程序，就是观察、评价以及计划。然后在我们开始与这个小孩开始的第1步，就是去知道小孩的能力、兴趣以及其他的所有。
Great, thank you. So then we have planning. So planning means we take the child's interests and we take their ability, and then we think, what can we do to help them learn more? And we'll talk in another training about what a child can learn and what is sort of expected, to give you some sort of structure and idea as to, if a child can do this, what are the next steps? But so the planning is just that: child's interest, child's ability. What can we do to help the child learn more? Faye, can you tell us this?
Okay. Let me think. First we should know what he interested in.
Can you say it in Mandarin?
翻译。
Sorry. 就是先首先知道他的兴趣点，然后对他感兴趣的一方面，我觉得这里如果要帮他学习更多的话，要从他感兴趣的地方开始，然后帮他先提高他最感兴趣的一方面，然后如果说有其他的能力，是就在这之外的，然后慢慢的去跟他感兴趣的地方去拉近联系起来，会更帮助他的学习。
对，他说的就是这个意思，他就是从小孩的兴趣和能力来计划和分析，小孩能够学到更多的是什么，我们能为他做什么，能期待的，我们怎样才能做到达到我们的期待，去提高他自己小孩的能力，差不多是这个意思。
Great, thank you. And then then we have assessment. So there are two different parts to this. So the first one is we assess what we've done, what we're doing right now. Is it working? Or is the child's interest gone somewhere else? We have to adapt. And then there's also, if the child does do the activity, how did the child do? Was the child engaged? Was the child concentrating? Did the child enjoy it? And then if they did it, how well did they do it? So if the activity is moving a cup from here to here, if you can see that on the video, if that's activity, did they manage or did they need support? And if they managed, we see it in three levels. So firstly, we call it emerging. So they're just trying to do it. They've understood and they're trying, but it's the very beginning. And then we have developing. So they're starting to learn how to do it. Maybe we need to help them, either physically or to show them so they understand. So developing with some support, they're doing it. And then there is secure. So they know what to do and they can do it on their own, independently, without help.
第三部分是评价，评价他刚刚说的，第一个评价就是要知道我们我们正在做的一切东西，然后正在做的这个计划，它是否是有效的？小孩在这些你的计划当中是否被融入进来了？是否是享受的？而且他们做这件事情的程度是怎样的？在这个他是自己能够完全达成呢，还是需要一些帮助？而在他这个发展过程当中呢，有3个阶段。第一个阶段，他刚刚说的叫 emerging， 是尝试凸显阶段，所以就是小孩正在尝试做一些事情。第2个阶段是什么 ？develop， 对，发展阶段，所以小孩可能需要在你的帮助下或者你的演示之下去完成这件事情，去知道怎样做这件事情。第3个阶段是什么？ 对 secure， 他说的就是一种成熟的一种完善阶段，就是小孩能够独立的完成这件事情。你们的那个单子上面有，I mean the 3 words are on your vocab list.
Great. So with the planning and assessment, we assess how well a child has managed to do it, and then we plan the next steps. So we think, next time we can do the same activity again if it's emerging because they haven't learned it. But once a child has got to secure, the next steps will be a different activity. Or if we're teaching the child colours, once they've learned 1 or 2 colours, we can introduce more colours. So it could be making the activity bigger, or it can be a different type of activity. So I'm going to give you an example here. So the key person, which is part of positive relationships, knows the child, which is unique child, and so knew that one little boy did not know how to count. He did not show any interest in counting. But she knew that for his age and for the other areas of development, he was much more advanced, and so mathematics, this boy was a little bit behind. So she planned an activity to introduce some counting. So she did a counting activity by counting the fingers, but he was not interested in counting fingers. The next time, she decided to count some, he was doing a building block activity, and so she counted the building blocks, but he was not interested in counting building blocks. So this type of planning and assessment occurred a few times, and she noticed that he was still not learning to count. And then she remembered he was very interested in vacuum cleaners. Do you know what a vacuum cleaner is?
吸尘器。
Oh.
It's not unusual. They make lots of noise, which boys sometimes like. Girls sometimes like it also. It involves movement. Children are often interested in vacuum cleaners. So the key person, knowing the unique child's interests, knew that he was interested in vacuum cleaners. So she got a catalogue to buy vacuum cleaners. And he loved the catalogue. He was very interested in this catalogue. So she planned an activity where he could do a cutting exercise, and he cut around the vacuum cleaners as well as he could for his age. And then there was a pile of vacuum cleaners cut out on the table, and she took 3 and she gave him the rest, which was maybe 10 or 20. So she had a few and he had many. And she said, I have more vacuum cleaners than you. And he understood the word more, and he was like, no, I have more. He was very interested in his big pile, and she had very few. She said, no, I have more. I have 1, 2, 3. He wanted to count. He wanted to show that he had more. And that was how she got him interested in counting. So she took his activity and then used it to plan. She knew his interests. She knew his interests, and then she planned an activity with it. So the assessment that showed he doesn't know how to count, he's not interested in counting construction blocks, counting fingers is not interested. She used that information and planned using his interests, and then she was successful at learning to count with him. Could Faye, do you want to explain that to me again?
OK， 就是他举了一个例子，是吧？从这个例子开始，就是说他一开始他想尝试数手指，数手指，然后他不感兴趣，然后他又用那个什么 building blocks 积木吗？对，然后他还是不感兴趣，然后最后他发现是那个吸尘器，是吧？管用。然后呢，他有另一种方法，就买了一些，然后他给那个孩子的数量比他少，是吗？然后让他来，他说我的比你的多，不是孩子的多应该是，然后说我的比你的多，然后孩子说不是我的多，然后他就开始数，然后在这个过程中他学会了。
对，大概意思是这样。你有什么补充的吗？
你有呢？
他是那个小孩是其他方面都很好，只是数学不好，然后所以他在做了前面2次计划，第一个是数手指，第二个是玩积木玩具都没有效果的情况下，他运用这个信息，然后他又喜欢吸尘器，所以他不是去买的吸尘器，他是买的那个 catalog， 就是一个目录，上面有很多吸尘器。首先让小孩去捡，捡完了之后，然后在桌子上堆了很多，然后在这上面，然后就才开始教的数，这样通过比较的方法。
利用兴趣，主要是通过一步一步的前面的 assessment 去发现他的，去排除掉，然后去发现他的兴趣点，然后再利用兴趣点去让他去学。
对，让他去捡吸尘器。
谢谢。So the assessment is for the activity, but then also the key people will do these reports, and so we do reports every term, so that we can see the progress of the child. And then we can compare with the standard, if you want, for a child of that age. Now every child is different, so there are different areas of learning. For example, there is physical development, there's also communication and language. In total, we consider 7 areas of learning. So it could be that no child progresses equally in 7 areas, no. Maybe they'll be better at physical development, but not so good at communication and language. And another child will be the opposite. They're very interested in mathematics, but not so much in physical development. So that there are always going to be differences. However, we want to see if a child is behind and not progressing. Maybe it could be, we call it PSED. Don't worry, we'll explain that later. But it's personal, social, and emotional development. So maybe one child is behind on that, and so we need to provide more support. And the best way is to do this, that we do the report and the tracking, and we see, are there any problems, are there any areas we need to give more support to, or is there more or less normal kind of standard development? So that is also part of assessment. And so if you notice something, often there will be a room meeting. I hope there's a room meeting in each classroom. There's supposed to be a room meeting in each classroom. I know sometimes it's difficult to find time. But if you notice something that you think one child is different, then please share that information. And the key person, maybe she saw something, and if you saw something, So this could be about a safeguarding concern that we talked about, but it could also be about just normal child development. Saying, oh, I've noticed this child is very interested in this, or a child is not confident to do this, or a child finds this very difficult. So all of that is part of assessment. So information you have, please share it.
他说，哎，他好像是说从那个 report 开始的，对不对？
对。
通知书，他说通知书其实就是一共有3个学期嘛，所以你每个学期结束，负责老师都会要写那个通知书，然后通知书一方面是看小孩的一些进步，然后与那个标准有关，像标准有7个方面，你们以后会看到。有些小孩他可能是比如说在身体方面得到了长足的发展，但是他的交流能力又不够，所以每个小孩都是不一样的。如果小孩在某一方面落后了，那么我们就需要给他更多的一些支持和帮助。以及你所获得的信息呢，需要在每一个教室的会议上得到分享。这样也许比如说法语老师，这个老师感觉到这一点，那个老师感觉同样的信息，可能这个时候就会采取更好的行动对于这个小孩。我其实就觉得是查漏补缺，我觉得是。
我们又讲。
Great, fantastic. So the next point is supporting every child. So we know from the unique child that every child has different personality and every child has different needs. And we talked about in a unique child we talked about equality and diversity. So we know that some children will have special educational needs. So this means that we're supporting every child. This enabling environment is what can we do to help these children? So with the knowledge of that all the children are different, what can we do for that? So it could be a child's needs could be different just from one day to the next day. So maybe a child is tired today and so needs different type of activity and support than tomorrow when the child is not tired. It could also be that at different times of day, when a child is hungry, maybe their needs are a bit different to when they're not hungry. Maybe at the end of the day they're tired, or maybe at the beginning of the day they're sleepy, or maybe a child has lots of energy and needs to move, or maybe a child is upset. So there could be all sorts of different needs, and we want to support every child with every different emotional need or physical need or interest. Maybe a child is bored, or maybe a child is better in smaller groups, less confident. Maybe when a child starts coming to the nursery, they need a lot of hugs and support and patience. And maybe another child needs to be more independent and to do things on their own. And maybe a child has a disability or, as I said, special educational needs. So every child will have a different need, and we have to know the children and help them with their need. Actually, maybe Juan, maybe you can tell us.
这段主要讲的就是孩子们其实每天不仅是每天都不一样，今天跟昨天不一样做，然后明天又跟今天不一样。其实，在一天里面，他们也会有很多种变化。比如说，在他们累的时候，他们的情绪；饿的时候，还有困的时候，还有很有能量，甚至有点很有能量的时候，沮丧的时候，就针对孩子们在每个阶段，其实一天里面的每个阶段，根据他们的不同的需求，我们给予我们所能够提供的支持，或者是其实就是另外还有就是比如说在他们累的时候，疯的时候，沮丧的时候，给予他们支持。这个支持它包括就比如说精神上的支持，还有身体上的支持，去满足他们的需要，然后去给他们耐心支持，或者是在他们需要拥抱的时候， 然后还有一些，比如说在一些小孩子在独立，他比较独立的时候，又基于不同的做法，主要就是不同的孩子他们有不同的需求，不同的阶段需求也不一样，所以要根据情况而定。
很好。
Very good conclusion.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, and then we've got the learning journey. So the children progress, basically, and we want to see, I've talked about it a little bit in the previous section, but we want to see the children progress and learn more. So in the previous section we observe, we assess, we plan, and so here we also check that the children are progressing. Maybe a comment you can tell us?
他刚刚他就是说小孩儿，他就是说要检查小孩儿是否有进步吧，就是这个学习的一个过程。
Great. And then the working together is, of course, we've got the key people, but we also work as a team. And also we might have to work with people from outside. So of course we work with parents as partners, but maybe a child does have special educational needs and we need a specialist. So we also work together with specialists. So the way to support a child is to know the child, to check that the child is progressing, and then if we need more support, then we can get support from our colleagues and we can get support from specialists.
他说因为是一个团体作战嘛，所以我们除了和家长配合以外，有可能对于有特殊教育要求的小孩儿，我们还需要和一些他说的是专家一起合作。如果我们需要更多我们的问题、我们的需求，我们需要更多帮助，都需要被提出来，因为这是一个团体的合作，团队。
Thank you. So the next section is the learning environment. So the learning environment is, how is it to be a child in our nursery? So sometimes, I gave you the example of the mobile phone. It's important that we we think of what is the experience for children. We often have a routine, we have a rota, we have activities. There are lots of things, responsibilities that we have, and just things that we have to do. How is it for the child? What is the emotional experience for the child? So, for example, if we're going to the playground and if it's winter and cold, does it take a long time to prepare the children with their coats? Are there some children who are waiting a long time? What is the impact on the child's emotion? Is that frustrating for the child? Should we maybe sing a song for the children who are ready so that they're not so frustrated whilst they're waiting? How about at lunchtime? Does it take a long time for things to be organised? Are we saying no all the time to the children? What is the emotional experience for the child for that? Do we have enough resources, or do the children often have to take turns, and is that frustrating? Is it too loud, that can have an impact on the child's emotions? Is there too much change? Is it difficult for a child to feel stable and secure? What is the way that we organise the day? What is the impact on the child? And are we providing quiet times and quiet activities as well as physical and more energetic activities? There's something called a transition. Transition is an important concept. So transition can be any change. Really, transition means change. It can be any change. So the change of arriving in the morning. Before they were at home, then they were between home and nursery, and now they're at nursery. That's 3 changes. And now the parent has left. That's a 4th change. And that's for a child who's been coming every day. That's still 4 transitions, little ones. But for a new child who arrives for the first time, that's a really big change. Before, they never came to nursery and they were always with their parents, and now they're at nursery and they're not with their parents. That's a really big transition. So there are big transitions and little transitions. And a child might need more support during the transition than when there's not a change. So for example, finishing lunch and going to sleep is a transition, it's a change. And a child might need more emotional support during those changes than if they're busy in an activity. So do you know what a dummy is? Dummy, do you know what a dummy is?
奶嘴。
So for a new child, when they're sleeping, we might allow it because it's a change. So we might allow them to have a dummy because it supports their emotion. However, if there's not a transition, we don't use dummies, because if they've got a dummy, then they're not talking, and there is a stage before talking called babbling, which is just making noises. And it's really important to use the muscles and the vocal cords to learn how to pronounce any words. We need to have strong vocal cords and control over our muscles. So if we have a dummy, we're not using the right muscles and we're not learning to control our voice. And so we will never learn to say a word. So during an activity during the day, we don't use dummies. But during a transition, especially towards sleep, it's okay to use a dummy for short periods of time. We try to reduce it, but sometimes new children need the emotional support. It might be different. It's possible that in different nurseries or different rooms they have a no dummy policy, but I'm just using that as an example. What are the other big transitions? There's a transition between the weekend and a Monday. Also, we close for 2 weeks in December and we close for 2 weeks in August. So after a long holiday, even a child who's been with us for 1 or 2 years, it's a big transition to be with the parents for 24 hours a day, 14 days, and then back at nursery. So maybe the child was very confident before the holidays, but after the holidays, it's a different emotional experience. So we must be aware of the changes in a child's life, the changes in the day, the individual, unique child, all of these things, and provide the environmental, we set up the organisation that allows us to provide emotional support to the child. That was a lot. Faye, can you remember it? Can you?
Okay.
And if you could speak loud enough for the cameras.
Okay. 还是他从那个手机那个故事开始讲，那个孩子的那个情感是非常的比我们更复杂细腻的。然后，比如说可能在穿衣服的时候，其他孩子可能需要等很长时间，然后我们就要注意到，给他唱一些歌之类的。然后如果是在吃午饭，还有吃午饭的时候，或者就每个时候，所有的时刻都要注意到，就是他们情绪的变化。然后还要注意这个教室里的资源是不是足够的，然后孩子是不是需要去排队用这些东西，如果是足够的，那他们就不需要排队。然后那个还有一些是什么就声音比较大的，是不是用什么 loud 说的，然后是不是你总是做出很多的变化，然后一些安排的一些事情。反正我们都要去组织，然后确定孩子在是一个安静的，然后是一个稳定的环境里面。要确保他们那个是什么？有就是 energetic 是那个有精力充沛的，对，去面对这个。在幼儿园里精力充沛的，然后还说到了就是那些转变，然后转变就很多，那个比如说在他那个吃午饭到睡觉的这个过程中，然后或者是在他可能是第一次刚来这个幼儿园，这些孩子，他可能是第一次接触这里，没有需要一个转变。然后还有就是在周末，还有过了一个周末之后，然后再来周一再来的时候也是需要转变。还有谈到那个奶嘴， 奶嘴的时候，但是这个奶嘴他在睡觉的时候用这个奶嘴可能是帮助他睡觉，但是如果是说在平时活动里面，如果你可能就不需要，因为这个会就是阻碍他说话呀，一些行动之类的。你们应该还有补充的吗？
没有，只有一个问题，他刚刚说到那个 energetic 的时候，是你在环境的时候，你有没有考虑，就是对幼儿园的环境布置是，他既需要安静的时间，也需要释放能力的时候，是这个意思，
好，谢谢。
另外还有讲到一个是 take turn， 我觉得他应该说的不是说资源是否足够，不需要排队，其实就是秩序的这个意识，小孩子一定要有，就是一个一个来。它里边教室里边的玩具，它很多，它都是只有一个，它只有一套的，所有的人都必须要一个一个的来，他用完了之后放回去，然后另外的孩子再继续用，然后另外我觉得这个部分讲的最重要的就是我们要意识到孩子们的变化，他在一天当中的变化，还有小孩子在面对变化时他的一些情绪上的反应，我们要意识他们的这个变化，然后理解他们的变化，然后再调节他们的这个变化所带来的情绪反应。
对，然后在环境上给他们支持。比如说刚刚的他说那个幼儿园的资源够不够？如果这个资源不够的话，会造成的影响就是小孩可能会觉得很困扰，很沮丧。如果他拿不到他想要的东西，其实也就是说幼儿园的环境对小孩的影响，以及幼儿园的所有安排、所有布置，包括不停的每一天的一些日常，比如说吃完午饭之后要去睡觉，睡了觉之后又是要醒来，又要去做活动，所有的这些安排对小孩的情绪上的影响，然后通过对情绪上的影响的分析，然后对环境再进行一些改造，来更加支持他们发展更多积极的情绪，是吧？
对。
Great. And then we have the outdoor and the indoor environment. So this is much more practical. So we will talk later about the 7 areas of learning. There's all these different areas, and we want to make sure that they're able to do the 7 areas of learning inside and outside. So we do have a. We'll do that later. There are 7 areas, so we want to make sure that the 7 areas are possible inside and outside. We want to make sure that the resources are available and safe, and that we include children's interests. And when we go outside, it's the same. We want the children to be able to learn in the different areas. In different cultures, in France, for example, when the children go outside, they just run and they just play. But in the UK, we are expected to make sure that they learn outside as well. So maybe we can count something. Like if you go to the park, we could count the red cars, for example. So we do mathematics and colours, for example. Or we could discover the world. So we look at nature, we look at the plants. Those are some examples. And then, yeah, that's it really. Just we make sure that inside and outside it's planned and ready for the children.
他的意思就是能够确保，内外的环境都可以被计划、被利用，然后可以，他说，被计划、被利用，然后促进小孩的学习。然后刚刚讲了，因为他有一个7大阶段嘛，刚刚说的，就是对小孩各个方面的发展，所以根据那一个就来计划一些，比如说你要不管你是去公园还是在幼儿园，你都要确保那些资源是否足够，是否可以利用。然后出去的时候，他刚刚讲了一个是，比如说你可以通过观察有多少辆红色的车来数车，这种户外活动的促进他们数学上面的学习，还可以通过去公园玩啊，去探索这个世界之类的，大概是这个意思吧。
是的，了解认识植物之类的吧，应该是。
对。
Great. Okay, and then the last one is the wider context. So We talked about transitions already, actually. I think we've spoken about this already. So transitions and continuity. So knowing that some things stay the same and some things change. And it could be a change from home and now starting nursery. Maybe the child was at a different nursery. Afterwards they'll go to school. These are the big transitions. We already talked about multi-agency working in a little bit. We can sometimes get experts to help us, especially if a child has special educational needs. It could be that we need to work with different specialists. So maybe there's a speech and language therapist who comes to help, but maybe there's also a physiotherapist that helps with something else. So we have to be open to want to work with many different specialists to make sure that all the needs of the child are met. And the final one is the community. So a child does not exist independently. A child probably has a family or a parent at a minimum, but then also lives and has neighbours, lives somewhere and has neighbours. Also is part of the school community, the nursery community. Maybe there could be different communities, so just so that we know that this is just really about awareness and working with the various people or groups as required. So if a child goes to, for example, a Chinese school on a Saturday morning, as a nursery we should communicate with that Saturday school to make sure that we're sharing information, especially about safeguarding, which is one of the areas, the umbrellas of responsibility. Safeguarding, if you don't remember, is on this one. So we want to be sharing that information, but also we can share reports that show the child's development. If the child goes to another nursery, we should share information with them. So just aware that a child doesn't exist in isolation, but is part of different groups, and we should be communicating with all of them, really. Okay, do you remember that one?
这个主要讲的就是前面一个 transaction 讲的是转变，其实就是我们之前谈到的，就是小孩子在环境里面所带来的一些，其实就是一些生活里面的各种转变，它对孩子的心理啊，他的成长都会有很大的影响。然后我们的话要做到尽量的就是要打开自己，要接受，要理解，是吧？
那是第二点。
那个是第二点。然后另外下一个就是第三个是可以翻译成社区。其实因为小孩子他要有这种社区的概念，因为我们比如说在家的时候，他有家人，还有邻居，这是一个社区。然后还有学习的时候，还有在学校，无论何时，其实人他不是一个不是一个孤立的个体，而是一个group， 一个团队，一个组织。另外的话，还有就比如说孩子他去到，比如说他周末去其他的学校上课，或者是他之后转校去到另外的一个老师跟老师之间都要做到一个信息的共享，比如说要去分享这个孩子他的在学习当中，在成长当中的经验之类的。
对，我觉得就是这个意思，应该就是你要了解孩子所在的所有的大环境，什么变了，什么没有变，以及比如说要多方合作的话，他刚刚讲的一个那个理疗师，有些小孩不能说话的，我们也需要和那些理疗师合作的。所有这些环境，他的大环境，比如说他的邻居啊，他的学校啊，他的中文学校，所有的一切都应该进行去了解和沟通。
把我们的观念告诉他们。
是互相交流信息。
Great. So that's the end of the neighbouring environment. We're going to do one more section with that one because it's coming up to 1 o'clock. So now it's the final part of this one. If that can just be added on. So this is, we've done enabling. This is learning. So instead, we're not going to use, we've done the first three. And we say if we have a unique child, plus positive relationships, plus enabling environments, we get learning and development.
Yeah.
So now we're going to do learning and development, but we're not going to use this set of examples. Instead, we're going to use this. You can see that. You should have a copy of that. So I've got one for you here, and I've got one for you. So we've got two sections here. We've got the characteristics of effective learning, and then we have areas of learning and development. So the first one, characteristics of effective learning, is how children learn, and then the next one is what they learn. So the characteristics of effective learning are how they learn. So they learn by playing and exploring. They learn by active learning. And they learn by creating and thinking critically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So with playing and exploring, really that's engagement. They're doing something. So they want to find out and explore. You'll notice this with children, they're so curious. They want to find out and they want to discover. So you'll see that all the time. And then they like to play with what they know. That's also great fun. If they know a toy, they know how it works, or they know how to use it. So they're engaged in, they're doing it. They're not exploring for the first time, but they're using something they know. And the third one is willing to have a go. So this is a little bit about confidence and a little bit about trying something for the first time. So all of these are what we'd call engagements, playing and exploring. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then we've got active learning, which is really about motivation. So we've got being involved and concentrating. So the opposite is looking away, not being interested. If a child is concentrating and looking and wants to be involved, so tries to be part of the song or tries to do something, they're participating. So then they're being involved and they're concentrating. And that's one of the reasons we try not, this is a very good thing, we try not to interrupt a child. If a child is doing something, maybe we can help them, but we don't want to interrupt it because concentration is so special, it's how they learn. So we want to keep and make concentration longer and longer. Then there's also when they try something, maybe they don't manage. If they're trying to walk, maybe they fall over. Or maybe they have to, we gave the example of moving something, maybe it's too difficult. But normally children do not manage the first time. They have to do it many times, try many times. And so this is the second one, is having the motivation to keep trying. And it is something that we can really learn from children. Sometimes when we get older, if we don't manage the first time, we give up. But children don't. Often they just keep trying. And that's one of the ways they learn. And the third one is enjoying what they wanted to do. So if they wanted to do something and they manage, they enjoy it. And that is also part of learning. That it's two things. It's repetition, and there's also, we talked about the expectation, and then it being the same as the expectation on a previous talk last week, I think it was, where it's very satisfying. If you think, if I do this, this is going to happen, and if you manage, it's very satisfying. You get a little release of dopamine in the brain. If you think you want to do something and you manage, very satisfying. So here they have an intention, they want to do something, and they manage to do it, and they enjoy that very much. And with that, it's they learn. They learn how to do it, and they learn confidence, they learn cause and effect. So that's all active learning.
Yeah.
And then the third one is creating and thinking critically, which is really about thinking. So they have an idea, maybe we give them some Lego and they build a shape, so they have an idea of how they want to use it. It's not your idea, they decide how to use it. Also maybe they choose an activity. So there are choices of different activities and they go, I want to do this one instead of that one. So they're thinking, maybe there's a problem they're trying to solve and they don't know how to do it, and they try different ways to do it. So that's all of that is about having their own idea and thinking. And the next stage is making links. So they realize that this is the same as that, or if this happens, that happens. So it could be that they understand that if they push a child, the other child cries.
Yeah.
Then they make a link, oh, I do this, that happens. Or it could be making a link that if they put water on their food, the food changes. So water and food, so that's fascinating for a child. We'll talk about schemas later, but transforming is very fascinating for a child, that things change or sometimes things don't change. And making the link is them thinking and understanding the world. They want to understand the world, and making links helps them understand. And then the last one is choosing ways to do things. So to get one result, there might be two different ways to do it. And if they choose which way to do it, that helps them understand as well. So that's thinking and choosing. So these are all the different ways that a child can learn. The characteristics means it's features, exactly. It's the features of effective learning. So we've got playing and exploring, active learning, and creating and thinking critically. So this is almost like the quality, like the how, the quality of learning.
Yeah.
It's very much the how. And the next stage is the area of learning and development. And we have 7 areas, which is this, which is, I don't know if you can see, but it's this column here. Those are the 7 areas. So we have the 3 prime areas, which are the 3, they're all important, but these are the most important. So we call it PSED, personal, social and emotional development, physical development, and communication and language. Those are the first 3. And then we have literacy, mathematics, understanding the world, and expressive art and design. So these are the 7 areas that we learn. So just a warning, on this one, this is a slightly older document, and this has changed. The content of this is not the same anymore. So if you can, I don't know if you can see, but if you can cross out that section because it's wrong. It's the old version, and this is the new version. So you should know these 7 areas off by heart. And we will ask you, what are the 7 areas of learning? And they're the 7. So PSED, physical development, communication and language, literacy, mathematics, understanding the world, expressive arts and design. They're the 7 areas. And each area has different subcategories. Do you understand subcategories? Subcategories. So, categories. I don't know, I have to look it up in a dictionary.
The small one.
The small ones?
Yeah.
So each of the 7 areas, each big area has some little areas inside it.
Yeah.
We got it.
So we've got the PSED,
Yeah.
and in that we have 3 areas. We've got making relationships, self-confidence and self-awareness, managing feelings and behavior. So in PSED we have these 3 areas. So what do you think making relationships is?
Relationships, the relationship between people and the relationship between the world, nature.
So here making relationships is about people, only people. So it could be between the children and the other children to make friends, or between the children and the teachers. So those are the relationships that we look at. And then we have self-confidence. So we talked about willing to have a go as a characteristic of effective learning, and you need some confidence to be willing to have a go, and that changes over time. And self-awareness is just being aware what you're feeling and what your needs are. And then managing feelings and behavior. So if I feel like this, what can I do, or what do I do? We're going to talk quite a lot about this later. This is just the summary, and I'll give you lots of examples. And then the next one is physical development. So that is moving and handling. And in moving and handling, we sort of have, or in physical development in general, we have two ways of thinking about things. There's gross motor skills, which is making big movements. So standing, walking, running, using your arms. And then we have fine motor skills, which is our fingers and our detail. So children will need to learn how to hold a pen in the future. So at the beginning, we try to get them to do some exercises where they can use their hands to try to learn how to control their hands. The youngest children find that very difficult, and they can do very basic movements. And then as we get older, we can be very, very, very precise with our movements. So all of that comes under moving and handling. And it's also moving things, not just ourselves, but moving objects. And then health and self-care. So we're teaching children that we need to do exercise, that we must move, that we must eat healthily. Some things like chalk we can't eat, and other things we can eat, all of that. And then how to get dressed and how to go to the toilet. All of these things are part of health and self-care. And then we have communication and language. So we've got listening and understanding. Oh, so it's listening and attention. It's changed. Listening and attention. So if you're, at the moment, you're both listening and being attentive. But if you're bored, you're not going to listen and not pay attention. But that's not the same as understanding, because you can be listening to me but not understand the words I use. So understanding is different. And then there is speaking. So do you remember our iceberg? So there's a lot of understanding under the water before the bit on the top, which is speaking. So all of that's communication and language. And this, we should really be the focus for all the children. And for the younger children, younger than age 2, we really focus on this. As they get older, 2, 3, and 4 years old, we add these specific areas. That doesn't mean that we do nothing with the younger children. This could also exist for the younger children. But there is more focus on the first 3, and then more focus on all 7 for the older children. So literacy is reading and also writing. But our children don't learn to write a lot. You know, we're not at primary school. So, and reading, all of these things, it's a progress. So the first step of reading is being interested in looking at a book. It's not actually reading words. It's just looking at the pictures and understanding that books have meaning. That's the first step. And then later we might learn to recognize some letters, maybe the first letter of our name, and then they'll learn to read and recognize their name. And then there'll be words as well. So even just understanding that words have meaning, that letters are useful, words are useful and mean something. That's the first stages of reading. And then writing, well, the first step of writing might be mark making. So maybe just, it's not really writing, but it's just, if I have a chalk or if I have a pen and I do this, it makes a mark. The first step is understanding. I do this and there's a mark. And then later, we might learn how to do a letter or write our name for the older children. So all of these things progress. And then we have mathematics, which is numbers. So we might just learn to count, which is a little bit like a song almost, even without singing. We just know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't, we can do it in a song, but even without a song, it's just a pattern, da, 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 you know? And then later we learn that it means something. And then even later we can do maybe 2 + 3 is 5. And then also mathematics is the concept of shape and space and measurement. So bigger and smaller, we would say, is a mathematical idea. And then does something need a lot of space or not much space? is something heavier than something else. What you might notice at the nursery is we do not use much plastic. We try not to have too much. In fact, we try to have no plastic toys, because plastic isn't very heavy. But if something is made of wood, for example, especially the Montessori equipment, we learn that bigger is heavy and smaller is light. So that's part of mathematics and science, and you get it better with real materials than with plastic. A plastic cube this size and small, you can't really notice the difference in your hands. But natural materials you can notice heavy and light. And then we want children to understand the world, so they learn about people, they learn about the world and technology. We'll look at this a bit later as well. And then the last one is expressive art and design. So exploring and using media and materials. So media and materials could be paint, or coloured pieces of paper, or glue, or cotton wool, and what is sand, and what is Play-Doh. Do you know what Play-Doh is? I think it's on this. Have a look on our vocab list. Yeah. That's the one.
Oh yeah.
How do you say it?
橡皮泥
Yeah.
Play-Doh.
Play-Doh, something you need.
To make the shape they want.
So we would call that media. It's all material.
Okay.
Probably material. So it's all of that comes in expressive art and design. And the last subsection is being imaginative. So here, what do you do with the Play-Doh? What do you do with the Lego? Like children can use their imagination. So that's part of being creative. So this is all part of expressive art and design. So these are our 7 areas and the sub-areas. And this is really, really important for planning. And when we talked about planning and assessment, we plan and assess according to these 7 areas and the sub-areas. The reports are divided into the 7 areas and sub-areas. So the key children will do reports every term, every 4 months, and we see, is the child progressing or not? We want to see improvement in all 7 areas. It's not going to be even. It's going to be, that's quicker than this, and then if there's another child, this is quicker than that. That's okay, but always getting better.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't get better, then we're worried and we must do something. We must take extra action to improve. So maybe the child has a special educational need. Maybe the child is just not interested. That's also possible. We gave the example of numbers and counting. But the child needs to learn how to count before going to primary school. So we must come up with a plan. How will we help the child find numbers interesting or something else interesting? If a child is very shy, maybe there's no problem, but the child is shy. But we would like the child to learn to be confident so that he or she can learn how to do things. That's an important, so how can we support the child? So here are the 7 areas and the sub areas. And I think next time we meet, we're going to be focusing on these 7 areas. I think I've said it before, but just in case I haven't said it, we know the unique child, and we've said that we look at the energy of the child, supporting the child's needs in enabling environments. Now that we're thinking of these 7 areas as well, all of that comes together. So if a child is not interested in an activity now, or doesn't have the right energy for an activity now, then we don't force them to do an activity, because the child will not learn. If the child is bored or frustrated, the child doesn't learn the content of the activity then. So that's why we have different activities at the same time in the classroom, that maybe a child is feeling more creative and wants to use the paint, or maybe they're tired and they want to look at a book, or maybe they're fascinated by the book. So we don't force the children to do an activity. We sort of, in the planning and in the assessment, we also think right now, is the child interested or not? Because if the child's not interested, they're not learning. And So we think of both the child's the unique child and the child needs, and then the supportive environment like that, and then we're thinking of these 7 areas. So it would be easy as a Chinese teacher to just do communication and language, to just think we're going to do songs and vocabulary. But that would be a shame, because you can learn vocabulary doing physical activity, and you can be looking at books, and you can be counting, and you could be understanding the world. So instead of just thinking communication language, we can also teach much more. So we want to see the 7 areas, and all of the different sub-areas. Even as a Chinese teacher, I think your priority is probably, I must only speak Chinese, one person, one language. Also think of these other areas. So that's why next time we're going to really look at different examples of what it can be, and there's a really big document that shows all of the areas for all of the ages. So what is examples for all of the areas? And it's a really helpful document to help you think about what the children are learning. So all of this is what, and the characteristics of the how. And they overlap a little bit. You'll see. Do we have any questions about the characteristics or the areas of learning? No, okay, great. So we'll be looking at examples, and you'll also do an online training about all of this as well.